The soup that broke the curse * for 23 endless days, the Crimson Palace lived under a shadow heavier than night itself. The Vampire King's daughter, Princess Seraphina, had rejected every drop of royal blood, every crafted meal, every ancient blend presented to her. The finest vampire sommeliers traveled across kingdoms. Priests whispered forbidden rites, healers recited forgotten spells, yet the child grew weaker, paler, and quieter. Her once crimson eyes had faded to the color of dying embers, her small hands trembling whenever she tried to lift a cup. King Lucien watched from the darkness of her chamber doorway each night, consumed by fear he refused to show. He had faced wars, rebellions, and centuries of loss, but nothing frightened him like the slow silence of his daughter. She was only 10, yet her body felt like mist in his arms, her laughter replaced by hollow breaths. The High Council warned him that an heir who could not feed might lose her claim to the throne, and by the next full moon they would invoke the right of succession. The threat burned in his veins, but helplessness burned deeper. On the 23rd evening, when hope had thinned like smoke, an accident shattered the stillness. A human waitress, young, clumsy, carrying a simple metal tray, burst through the wrong door and slipped, sending her steaming bowl of vegetable soup crashing across the pristine marble floor. The scent rose instantly, warm, earthy, humble, nothing like vampire delicacies. The guards lunged, but Princess Seraphina lifted her head for the first time in days. Her nose twitched, her eyes sharpened. She slid down her chair, knees shaky, and walked toward the spilled broth as if drawn by invisible threads. King Lucien took a step forward, stunned speech freezing him in place. Before anyone could react, the princess dipped a finger into the soup and touched it to her lips. The world paused. The torches flickered. The marble hall felt suddenly too small. Seraphine's eyes widened, and then, impossibly, beautifully, she smiled. A fragile, trembling smile that had been missing for nearly a month. "More," she whispered, as if the word itself carried life. Mira the waitress, terrified and small in her plain uniform, stammered that it was just human food, only vegetables and herbs. Seraphina tugged at her sleeve with desperate strength. "More. Please." King Lucien had no answers. Vampires could not taste human food. They could not digest it. They could not survive on it. But his daughter was drinking it as if her soul recognized it. Mira returned to the kitchen and brought a real bowl this time. Seraphina drank it like a starved child discovering sunlight. Color returned to her cheeks. Her shaking stopped. Her lips warmed. For the first time in 23 days she looked alive. Mira stepped back, trembling, expecting anger or punishment. Instead, King Lucien looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and something else, something dangerously close to hope. "What is your name?" he asked quietly. "Mira, your majesty." "From this night forward," he said, voice heavy with command, "you will cook for the princess. Only you." The hall echoed with gasps. The human girl stared, unable to breathe. Seraphina clutched the empty bowl and whispered, tears forming at the corners of her eyes, "It tastes like mother." King Lucien froze. That single word cracked him open from within. His queen, the princess's mother, had once cooked humble soups in the palace gardens, human recipes, warm and simple. And now, decades after her death, her daughter smiled. Again, because a human girl had recreated what the queen once made. As the king carried the princess to her chambers, his heart thundered with fear and wonder. Behind them, Mira knelt on the cold floor, cleaning the spilled soup with shaking hands, unaware that her single bowl had just altered the fate of the vampire kingdom. The herb that should not exist. Dawn crept gently across the crimson palace, casting pale light through stained glass windows and washing the halls in soft patterns of red and gold. The servants began their morning duties in hushed tones, whispering about the impossible miracle that had taken place during the night. No one knew the full truth except the king, the guards, and the trembling human girl who had stayed behind long after the incident. When King Lucien returned to the grand dining hall at first light, expecting emptiness, he found Mira still there, kneeling on the marble floor with a bucket beside her, scrubbing the last traces of spilled soup. Her hands were red from cleaning. Her body exhausted, yet she worked carefully as if the floor itself could feel pain. She scrambled to her feet the moment she heard his approach. "Your Majesty, I was just finishing," she whispered, clutching the cloth in both hands. "It has been 3 hours," he said quietly. She lowered her head. "I wanted the place to be perfect before the morning staff arrived, and needed time to think about what to cook next for the princess." Lucien watched her in the slanted morning light. She looked small, fragile, and yet strangely steady, the kind of steadiness born from years of surviving without help. "Tell me," he said, "every ingredient you used last night." Mira straightened, nervously twisting her fingers. "Carrots, potatoes, onions, just what the kitchen allows humans to use. But the herbs—" She hesitated. "I brought those myself." A flicker of something dark crossed the king's eyes. "Which herbs?" "Thyme, rosemary, and silverleaf." Lucien's entire body went rigid. The word struck him like a blade. "Repeat that," he demanded. "Silverleaf, your Majesty." "My grandmother gave me the seeds. It's a wild herb from our village. She always said it makes food taste like home." Mira's voice softened. "The kitchen master said humans must provide their own herbs, so I've been growing a small patch behind the servants' courtyard." For a long moment the king said nothing. The silence grew heavy around them. Silverleaf. The herb that had been banned from the palace since the queen's death. The herb that grew only in one distant valley, the valley where his queen had been born. The herb she had used in her garden soups. The herb whose scent once filled their chambers. No one else in the kingdom should have had access to it. No one except her lost family. His pulse thundered. "Where did your grandmother get the seeds?" he asked, voice low. Mira swallowed. "She said they were passed down from her mother. And her mother before that. I never questioned it." The weight in Lucien's chest tightened. Generations, a lineage. A connection he had never thought to search for. The queen had often spoken of her family in the Eastern Valley's humans who preferred to stay hidden from vampire politics. After her death, he had sealed all ties to spare them from the council's cruelty. Could this girl? He forced the thought away, not yet ready to face it. Meanwhile, the palace buzzed with uneasy energy. The royal chefs were outraged that a human girl had succeeded where all of them had failed. Nobles whispered that human food had cursed the princess. Guards muttered that Mira must be practicing Forbidden's magic. The High Council, already hungry for power, demanded an immediate investigation. And through it all, Princess Serafina clung to the memory of the warm soup as if it were life itself. When Mira brought her breakfast a fresh bowl made with the same ingredients, the princess reached for it with trembling eagerness and ate it with a soft smile that made her look like herself again. Her cheeks glowed with renewed color, her eyes brightened, and the faintest hints of growing fangs pressed behind her small lips. "It tastes like her," the princess whispered. "Like my mother." Lucien heard the words from the doorway and felt the ground tilt beneath him. Later that day, when Mira left the princess's chamber, a group of vampire nobles blocked her path and surrounded her with smirks of disdain. "So, little human," one hissed, "you think you can fool the royal line with your peasant tricks?" Another sneered, "What did you put in that soup? Sorcery? Poison?" Mira said nothing. She simply lowered her gaze and absorbed the insults in silence, something she had done all her life. But this time someone saw it. Serafina stepped forward, her small voice cutting through the sneers. "Leave her alone." The nobles stiffened. No one defied the prince's not in her own corridor. Mira looked at the child with astonishment, not expecting protection from royalty. That night, after the palace quieted, Lucien opened a hidden chest locked for 10 years. Inside lay an old scroll written by his queen, her cooking notes, her simple recipes, her drawings of silverleaf leaves, the same herb, the same symbols, the same scent. His hand trembled. The queen's memory breathed through the parchment, and Mira's soup had awakened it. When he looked up, he finally understood. The truth was coming for him, whether he was ready or not. Whispers, jealousy, and the poisoned bowl *, the days that followed were anything but peaceful. What began as a quiet miracle soon twisted into storm clouds over the Crimson Palace. Every corridor shivered with whispers, jealous ones, fearful ones, and dangerous ones. The royal chefs, who once carried their pride like armor, now moved with stiff shoulders and narrowed eyes. They could not accept that a poor human waitress had done what centuries of vampire culinary tradition could not. Nobles muttered that the princess's sudden recovery was unnatural, that human food must carry hidden curses, that the king had lost judgment in his grief. Even the servants, frightened of punishment, kept their distance from Mira as if she carried a forbidden flame in her hands. But despite the growing hostility, Mira remained quiet, showing the same stubborn resilience she had always lived with. She kept her head down, worked in silence, and prepared Seraphine's meals with gentle hands. And each time she entered the princess's chamber, the child's face lit up with a glow that no spell or medicine had ever been able to create. Seraphina trusted her completely, even followed her around the room on unsteady feet, trying to help mix herbs or stir broth. It was the closest thing the princess had felt to warmth since her mother's death. But outside those walls, danger grew like a coiled serpent. The High Council summoned King Lucien to accuse him of letting a human interfere with royal bloodlines. They claimed Mira's presence could be a threat, a political trap, or even a rebellion seed. Lucien shut down their accusations with cold authority, but he felt the unease tightening around him. The kingdom believed leaders did not bend to humans. Allowing Mira inside the princess's life challenged everything the vampire hierarchy stood for. The council demanded a trial to evaluate the human girl's influence. Lucien refused, but even he knew this peace would not last. And in the shadows of the palace corridors, someone was waiting for a moment to strike. That moment came one quiet evening. Mira had just finished preparing a fresh bowl of silver-leaf soup, her hands steady despite the pressure of countless eyes watching her. She carried it carefully toward Seraphine's chamber, humming softly something she hadn't done since arriving at the palace. But as she turned the corner, she felt the air shift. The guards were not at their posts outside the princess's door. The hallway felt too still, too cold. Before she could react, a gloved hand snatched her tray and hurled it against the wall. Mira gasped as the bowl shattered, spilling soup across the floor. A group of nobles emerged from the shadows, led by Lady Varentia, one of the most influential voices on the council, cruel and elegant. "Enough of this human farce," Varentia hissed. "You do not belong here." Mira stepped back, heart pounding, but she forced herself to speak. "The princess needs her food. She is still recovering." "She needs blood, you ignorant girl," another noble spat. "Not your peasant sludge?" They surrounded her, their eyes glowing with quiet fury. One reached into his cloak and held up a small pouch filled with strange dark powder. Mira froze. She recognized the smell instantly: silver dust, poisonous, deadly to a human, corrosive even to vampires. "We found this near your herb patch," the noble declared, loud enough to echo through the corridor. "Proof that you have been tampering with the princess's meals." Mira's breath caught in her throat. Someone had planted it there. Someone wanted her framed. "I never," she began, but the noble cut her off. "Silence. You will come with us." Before they could seize her, the princess's door swung open. Seraphina stepped out, small but fierce, her crimson eyes burning with the strength returning to her body. "Don't touch her." The noble stiffened. No one disobeyed a royal command, especially from the air. But Varentia smiled thinly. "Your Highness, she has harmed you." "We found poison." Seraphine's face twisted in confusion, then fear until she spotted the spilled bowl. She dropped to her knees and touched the faint traces of broth left on the marble. Her fingers trembled. "She wouldn't hurt me," Seraphina whispered. "She saved me." Lucien arrived moments later, drawn by the commotion. His eyes took in the scene, the shattered bowl, the nobles, the trembling child, and Mira standing alone like a hunted creature. His fury simmered under the surface. "Explain," he demanded. Varentia tried to spin lies, but Lucien's gaze cut through them like a blade. Still, even his authority could not erase the truth. Someone had tried to poison the princess's meal or frame the girl who saved her. Mira's hands shook as she gathered the fragments of the broken bowl, her voice barely a whisper. I only wanted to help her. Serafina clung to Lucien's cloak, tears forming. Papa, don't let them hurt her. Lucien lifted his daughter into his arms, heart twisting with dread. When he looked at Mira again, something inside him hardened an instinct older than his throne. He would not let this girl be crushed by palace cruelty. But as he carried Serafina away, one chilling truth settled like ice in his veins. This was no accident. Someone inside the palace wanted Mira gone. Someone was willing to kill for it. Bloodlines, secrets, and the forbidden truth night settled heavy over the Crimson Palace, but no one slept. After the attempted poisoning, King Lucien sealed the entire estate under strict lockdown. Guards patrolled the corridors with sharpened senses, and nobles were confined to their quarters, whispering curses behind closed doors. Mira was escorted back to the servant wing by 2 trusted guards, her hands trembling with shock. She could still hear the shattering of the bowl, still see the pouch of silver dust being held up like a death sentence. But what haunted her most was the look on Seraphine's face: fear, confusion, and unwavering trust. Trust she had not earned, yet somehow carried like a fragile flame. Meanwhile, Lucien moved through the palace like a storm barely contained. He questioned every guard, inspected every hallway, and interrogated the nobility with a predator's precision. But the deeper he dug, the more he sensed the truth hiding in the shadows, not just treachery, but something older, deeper, tied to the very foundations of his past. Finally, when the palace fell silent, he made a decision he had avoided for years. Mira was summoned to the royal physician's chamber. She walked in nervously, expecting accusation or punishment, but found Lucien standing beside an ancient crystal device used only for high-level blood analysis. The air tasted cold, metallic, and serious. Sit, Lucien said softly, his voice different from before, quieter, almost careful. Mira obeyed. Your soup healed my daughter, he continued. Your herbs revived memories that should have died with the queen. And tonight, someone tried to kill you for it. Mira's heart hammered. Your Majesty. I swear I know, Lucien interrupted. But I need to understand why your presence affects my daughter, and why the palace reacted with such violence. He extended a small blade. I must test your blood. Not for poison? For lineage. Mira froze. Lineage? Yes, he said, locking eyes with her. Because the herb you use, Silverleaf, hasn't existed in this palace for 10 years. Because it only grows in one valley? The valley where my queen was born. A shiver ran through her spine. The queen. The lost queen whose death had nearly broken the empire. Slowly, Mira extended her hand. The blade made a tiny cut, and a droplet of her blood fell onto the glowing crystal slab. The room hummed. The crystal pulsed, threads of light weaving through it like veins awakening. The physician leaned forward with wide eyes as the pattern began to reveal itself, a map of ancestry no vampire could forge. Lucien's face changed, shock, recognition, something close to heartbreak. It cannot be, the physician whispered. But it was. The crystal displayed the unmistakable symbol of the Lunar Rose bloodline, the ancient human clan from which the queen herself had descended. Mira stared in confusion. What does it mean? She whispered. Lucien breathed slowly, as if stepping across a memory he had spent years avoiding. It means you are her kin. My queen's kin. Her blood runs through you. The words hit Mira like a lightning strike. She shook her head, tears burning. That's impossible. I'm nobody. I grew up in a small village. My grandmother your grandmother, Lucien said gently, was likely the queen's cousin. The queen begged me to protect her family from the council's cruelty. After she died, I closed all records. I thought they lived peacefully in hiding. Mira felt her world tilt. The stories her grandmother told about a lost relative, about herb gardens, about a woman who once lived in a palace, they weren't fairy tales after all. Lucien turned away, guilt carving shadows into his features. If I had kept them closer, if I had known... Perhaps the queen would not have died alone. Mira's chest tightened at the sorrow in his voice. But the revelation did not end there. The physician stepped forward, voice trembling. Your Majesty. There is something else. Lucien looked sharply. What? Princess Seraphine's illness, her inability to feed, was not a curse. It was a bond fever. A rare condition triggered when a young vampire with mixed heritage is separated from someone carrying the same ancestral scent. Mira gasped. You mean she was starving because she needed the warmth of your lineage, the physician finished. Your herbs, your cooking, your touch, they awakened the memory of the queen within her. It healed the bond she never had the chance to form. Silence fell like snow. Everything suddenly made sense. The smile, the recovery, the taste of mother. Serafina had been reaching for the only living link to the queen she had lost. And someone in the palace had discovered the truth and feared it. Lucien turned to Mira, eyes filled with a mixture of awe and sorrow. You were never just a waitress, he said quietly. You were a missing piece of my queen's bloodline, a piece that threatens those hungry for power. Mira felt tears slip down her cheeks. She had lived her whole life believing she was ordinary, barely surviving, ignored by the world. Now she carried the weight of a royal legacy she never asked for. What will happen to me now? She whispered. Lucien stepped closer, voice steady with new resolve. Now, Mira Ashwood, I will protect you. But even he knew the truth. This revelation would ignite the palace like wildfire. And not everyone would let a human girl with royal blood live long enough to claim her place. Asterisk, the trials, the threat. And the slow-burning bond, the revelation of Mira's bloodline, spread through the palace like a forbidden windsoft at first, then violent, then impossible to contain. Though Lucien swore all present to secrecy, there were too many eyes, too many motives, too many schemes already in motion. By sunrise, the nobles whispered of a human heir. The chefs muttered of dangerous lineage, and the High Council cloaked itself in the sweet scent of opportunity. For them, Mira Ashwood was not a girl. She was a threat powerful enough to fracture the throne. And Serafina, blissfully unaware of the political storm building around her, clung to Mira with a devotion that only deepened suspicion. Mira tried to keep her distance, fearful of the attention. But the princess followed her everywhere with fragile steps and bright eyes, calling her name like it was a secret melody. Lucien watched their bond quietly, realizing Mira had given his daughter what even he could not: comfort without fear, warmth without duty. Yet with that realization came conflict. He felt something else stirring in him, a pull he had buried for years, a quiet gravitation toward Mira that frightened him more than war or counsel. It wasn't love, not yet. It was the beginning of something softer, something patient, something that grew every time she protected Serafina with trembling courage. But romance was a luxury neither of them could afford. Not when the council launched their first blow. They summoned Lucien to the Grand Hall for a formal trial framed as an evaluation of the human's influence on the air. Mira was ordered to stand before them, surrounded by robed elders whose eyes gleamed with disdain. Serafina clutched her hand, refusing to let go. The hall filled with nobles, soldiers, priests, every faction eager to witness the moment the human girl would be cast out. One councilman spoke venomously. She is a danger to the throne. Humans bring weakness. Another added, her bloodline threatens royal purity. Lucien's temper coiled like a tightening storm, but before he could speak, Mira lifted her chin and answered softly, I never sought power. I only wished to feed the princess. Her voice, small yet steady, echoed across the hall like a fragile truth too pure to crush. Serafina stepped forward and declared, She saved me. None of you did. Gasps rippled through the chamber. For a moment, even the council fell silent under the weight of the child's honesty. But power-hungry hearts do not bend easily. The council demanded conditions. Mira must remain under constant surveillance, forbidden from leaving the palace or approaching noble chambers. She would be given a new title, Royal Guardian, but with it came a collar of expectations designed to trap her. Lucian saw through their ploy immediately. They wanted to claim her, control her, and use her lineage as a weapon. That night, Lucien found Mira alone in the courtyard, sitting beside her herb patch, her hands trembling as she dug her fingers into the soil. "You don't have to stay here," he said quietly. "There are safe villages far from the council's reach." Mira shook her head. "If I leave, Serafina will fall sick again. And even if she doesn't, she feel abandoned." Lucian felt something twist inside him, a subtle, painful admiration. "You always choose others over yourself," he murmured. "Perhaps that is why my daughter lives." Their eyes met, not with heat or longing, but with shared exhaustion, shared fear, shared determination. A bond forming slowly, like dawn rising behind mountains. But the palace was not finished with its cruelty. On the 7th night after the trial, a coup began. A faction of nobles, desperate to erase Mira's existence and claim power, attacked the princess's wing. The guards were ambushed, the torches extinguished, and smoke filled the hallway. Mira sensed something wrong before anyone else. She sprinted through the dark, heart-pounding, and reached Seraphine's chamber just as the attackers burst in. Without thinking, she shielded the child with her body, pulling her beneath the bed as blades clashed outside. A noble seized Mira by the arm, hissing, "This ends tonight." She fought back not with strength, but with sheer will, scratching, kicking, screaming for help. Serafina clung to her, sobbing. Moments before the noble struck again, Lucien arrived like a storm of steel and fury. His roar shook the walls as he cut through the attackers with terrifying precision. When he reached Mira, she was shaking violently, arms wrapped around the prince's as if her life depended on it. "You protected her," Lucien whispered, kneeling beside them. "With everything you had." Mira's breath trembled. "I would die for her," she choked. Lucian's gaze softened in a way no one in the palace had ever seen, gentle, reverent, almost vulnerable. Something unspoken passed between them, something fragile and dangerous. Later, when the rebels were imprisoned and the princess was safe in bed, Lucien approached Mira in the infirmary where her bruises were being tended. He spoke low, steady. "Let me give you a place beside us. Not as a servant. Not as a guardian. As someone equal." Mira's eyes widened, heart pounding. "Your Majesty, I can't be that. I'm human. You are not just anything," he said. "You are the reason my daughter lives. The reason I still have hope." She shook her head, tears slipping. "I'm not ready. I don't belong in your world. Not yet." Lucien accepted her answer with quiet dignity, but something in his expression told her the truth: he would wait. Not force, not rush. Just wait. Because something had begun between them, something they both felt but neither dared name. And while the council plotted its next move, and the kingdom whispered of rebellions and bloodlines, the three of them, king, child, and human, stood on the edge of a future no prophecy had foretold. A queen chosen by kindness, the final dawn of the old kingdom arrived with iron in the air. After the failed coup, the palace could no longer pretend the threat was small. The High Council gathered in the Grand Court under the pretense of restoring order, but their real intent was clear. They wanted Mira removed forever and the throne bent to their will. Lucien entered the court wearing his war cloak. Serafina at his side in a crimson dress she had not worn since her illness, and Mira behind them, quiet, steady, carrying none of the arrogance the nobles feared, only a calm strength that had been forged in suffering. The trial began like poison dressed as law. Varentia and her faction accused Mira of corrupting royal blood, of manipulating the king's grief, of using human sorcery to bind the heir. But Lucien had prepared for this moment. One by one he summoned witnesses, guards who confessed the nobles' bribes, healers who revealed the silver dust was planted, and even a council scribe who had copied secret orders placing assassins near Seraphine's wing. Every lie collapsed under the weight of truth. When Varentia tried to flee, Lucien's head guard seized her in front of the entire court. The king's voice carried like thunder. "You spoke of purity while plotting murder. You spoke of tradition while breaking every sacred law. You do not protect this kingdom, you devour it. The crowd watched, stunned, as Lucian pronounced justice. The conspirators were stripped of rank, their estates dissolved, their titles erased from the royal archives. It was instant karma, delivered not out of cruelty but necessity, and for the first time in centuries, the court felt the power of a ruler who would not bow to fear. Serafina stepped forward next, small but unshaking. "These people wanted me dead," she said, her voice clear. "And they wanted Mira dead because she fed me when all of you watched me fade." The nobles lowered their eyes. In that moment, the heir was no longer a sick child. She was the future queen. Silence fell, and then something else followed, something softer. Lucian turned to Mira, not as a king to a subject, but as a man to the person who had carried his world back from the edge. "You were born human," he said, "but you carry the queen's legacy not in blood alone, also in heart. My daughter is alive because you loved her without reward. Our kingdom is alive because you stood against its darkness without power." He paused, letting the truth settle. "I asked you once to stand beside me. I do not ask for your obedience. I ask for your choice." Mira's throat tightened. She looked at Serafina, who reached for her hand with childlike certainty, then looked back at Lucian, whose eyes held grief healed into hope. "I was never searching for a crown," she whispered. "I was only searching for a place where kindness isn't punished." Lucian nodded. "Then we will build that place together." The court expected a formal vow, but Mira did something far braver. She stepped closer and bowed not to the council, but to the people gathered there. "If I accept this life," she said, voice trembling yet firm, "it will not be to rise above humans or vampires. It will be to protect both. No one should be treated as I was treated. Not a servant, not a half-blood, not a child." Her words broke something old in the room. Even some nobles, ashamed of the world they upheld, bowed their heads. Lucian announced the new decree that same hour, human staff would be protected by law, mixed bloodlines recognized with honor, and the council reformed so no faction could ever threaten the heir again. The palace gates opened not as a symbol of weakness, but of a kingdom finally strong enough to be just. That evening, the Crimson Palace felt different, less like a fortress, more like a home. In the royal garden, Mira cooked once more, the same silver-leaf soup simmering in a simple pot. Serafina sat beside her, smiling, cheeks full of life, fangs finally visible in a healthy grin. Lucian watched them from the steps, the ache of the past still present, but no longer ruling him. When Mira offered him a bowl, he hesitated only a second before tasting it. The warmth spread through him like a memory returned. "It tastes like her?" he whispered, eyes shining. Mira nodded softly. "And like tomorrow." Under the quiet stars he took her hand, not in possession but in promise, and this time she did not pull away. She stood beside him as an equal, chosen not by prophecy or blood alone, but by courage, humility, and love that grew slowly enough to last forever.